Melillo. He's created the Melillo method, and we will discuss this. Doctor, welcome. You know what? There is an addiction out there with this. Heck, even my kids are a little older right now, but I remember the day, and still some of them still desire a PlayStation for Christmas. And they're 30 and 32 years of age, but in essence, the craze goes on, but it gets very serious, correct? Welcome aboard.
Yes, thank you for having me. Yes, this is a serious issue, actually, especially when it relates to something like ADHD. This is the question. Does computer games and computer gaming have an effect on the brain? And is that effect negative or positive? Most of what this study seems to show is that there seems to be a negative effect on the brain because it is in almost 75% of the individuals in this study that had ADHD, they were addicted to video games. So that's a pretty high number. There's clearly a relationship. And so what we see is that, video gaming is actually affecting the brain, and it's actually affecting the brain in the exact same networks that cause addiction to any other drug or anything else.
Yeah, very serious stuff as far as these findings are concerned. You're talking about criteria, folks. There's a thing called IGD, which is Internet Gaming Disorder. That's a real situation, or gaming disorder, GD. People without the condition. Then, as far as, we're talking about young adults with ADHD, more likely to meet this criteria, talking about the IGD and the GD, than those without the condition. This is a new study, right, Doc? New study that was published in the Journal of Attention Disorders.
Yeah, this study just came out, and it's actually a good study. I've written a paper recently on the neuroanatomy of ADHD. And again, there's some people out there that say ADHD isn't a real problem. It is. Essentially, what we see in ADHD is there's an overactivity of certain particular networks on the left hemisphere that are overactive that also are related to things like OCD, tics. So there's a high overlap. And what we see is there's a deficit on the right side of the brain, which is really what governs attention, especially sustained attention, but also social interactions, empathy, being able to really understand complex social situations. And so we see that, this is a real issue. And there's a part of the brain called the basal ganglia that we know, we have a lot of dopamine in there. There's the reward center of the brain in there. And that's the center of the brain that is related specifically to addiction. And this is related to an increase in the left hemisphere. And this is exactly what we see in video gaming, that it specifically increases activity in the left hemisphere in those dopaminergic networks, and it decreases the right side of the brain that has to do with empathy and certain aspects of attention and even feelings of morality.
Very interesting stuff with Dr. Robert Melillo. I mean, when you get down to it, is it at the fault of the parents for not providing maybe another caveat of life for their child? It seems like you get into these phases in life. I remember with my kids, you bring them a game, the old Madden football games, and, that would suffice for a while. They move on to other games, but they had other areas in which they could kind of delve into of participation in real life activities here. Do parents have to do a better job as far as formulating those extra type of activities?
I think some of the issues have to fall with the parents. I'm not expecting parents to read research papers and know this. Obviously, they don't suspect it, that it's going to cause an issue, which literally it means that doing too much video games may actually be one of the potential causes of ADHD. But what I find in general, we work with, parents and kids every day, is it's kind of cultural now. One of the things is you have everybody doing it, so that's a problem. Because everybody feels like, well, if my kid doesn't do it, then, am I being mean to them, or are they being treated unfairly? But, also it's easy. It's easier when you have a kid that can kind of, the video game can be the babysitter. And it makes it easier. And a lot of parents now are also on their phones or on their devices all the time. But, I find that parents today feel like they need to keep their children entertained 24/7. if a child says to a parent today, I'm bored, the parent feels literally like they're a bad parent. And I'm sure when you were growing up, if I said that to my parents, they would make me clean the toilet, right? So I'm sure parents were probably the same way. So part of it is that I think parents have to realize that we have to let our children, do things like go outside, use their imagination, use their physical body, go shoot basketball hoops, do something rather than sit inside and play these video games.
Well, listen, we used to chase our kids out. That was the key. The problem I think today is that you have both parents who work, and therefore a kid who goes to school comes home. What do you do? That's they're not going to do homework. They're not going to read. They're going to play video games. Most of them will, I would think, because of the lack of supervision at home. And listen, in today's world, parents have to work, the economy and everything else, but there's a lot of free time for these kids.
You're absolutely right. I actually wrote that in my book, Disconnected Kids, that, that was one of the major factors that both parents are working. And also, whether it's true or not, we perceive the world as more dangerous now. So a lot of parents are just afraid to let their kids out. I mean, when you were younger, I'm sure, when I was a kid, even my kids used to just go outside, ride their bike, be gone all day. Obviously, we didn't have cell phones. Parents won't do that today. They're afraid to let their kids out. Maybe we have too much information, or maybe the world is a little bit more dangerous. But, both parents working and then being afraid to let your children out because you're afraid something bad's going to happen, that's also driving it, both those factors.
Factor, too, with all that's going on in our world from a criminal aspect, it's tough. It's tough to send a kid out there and say, you know what, come home for dinner and not worry. Very, very, very tough situations involved here. But you have some methodology and everything else. You are treating individuals of this nature. What are the two or three top components, Doc, that you're using?
The main thing, there are really three things. One is most people with ADHD, what it is, there's nothing wrong with the brain. There's no damage. There's a developmental imbalance between networks in the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, where there's an overactivity of the left and underdevelopment of the right. This is often related to something called retained primitive reflexes. These are reflexes we're born with that should go away at one. If they don't go away, they will lead to a delay in development, immaturity in the brain, and an imbalance. So, one, we need to get rid of the primitive reflexes, and we do it in our center in Rockville Center, but we also train parents how to do it at home. Two is we need to create a balance between these networks by using different types of stimulation and brain stimulation. We'll use things like transcranial, direct and alternating current, electrical stim like the TENS unit. We'll use lasers. We actually use vibration, and we actually will use some sort of video games, but we've designed video games that actually target the correct areas of the brain. And then we also need to get most of these kids more connected to their body by moving their body, by increasing their muscle tone, by doing gross motor development. And then we support that with diet and nutrition. And those are the three foundational things that we need to do. And if we don't do that, then we're not going to change much. But we can completely eliminate the diagnosis of ADHD and many other neurobehavioral disorders using that approach.
Yeah, key approach, no question. And it's all about finding ways to deter this type of stuff, which has certainly been on the rise. You look at all these commercials now, the Call of Duty and the violence. And a lot of this, and do you feel this way? A final question on my end, Doc. Do you feel a lot of the situations that we witness and view as far as the violence in our country, is that an attribution of all these violent games that these kids play? Call of Duty, prime example. There's a lot of guns, a lot of blood, a lot of gore. Is that a contribution as far as what you're seeing there?
Absolutely. The feelings of guilt and shame, embarrassment, empathy, these are right hemisphere emotions. And it's been shown that there's an area of the brain called the orbital frontal cortex. And as individuals play video games, especially first shooter games, it activates the left side of the brain, which really is more aggressive, can lead to anger and violence and hypersexuality. And it actually dampens the right orbital frontal cortex, is where we feel guilt and shame and empathy. So what we see is, and I've actually looked at this, I've gone back all the way to Columbine, and if you go back and look at almost all of the school shootings over the last years, you'll see that almost all of them, there was a diagnosis of something like OCD, ADHD, schizophrenia, all of these being right hemisphere delays. And they were all almost to the T addicted to video games. And one of the most interesting things from the FBI records is that many of the victims actually say that when they were in the midst of the shooting, the ones that survived said they looked like, the shooter looked like they were playing a video game. And I believe many of them are in a psychotic state where they've lost touch with reality, and the right brain does what we call reality testing. And video games can do that as well. It can make individuals lose touch with reality. And I think many of them actually think they're in a video game.
It really is, and that's why you have created the Melillo method. DrRobertMelillo.com. That's Robert Melillo. That's Melillo, ladies and gentlemen. DrRobertMelillo.com. Check it out. He's creator of the method. Fascinating, really is. Very interesting topic. Doc, great stuff. We look forward to the next time with you. How's that?
Yeah, same thing. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Appreciate it all. 846. Ladies and gentlemen.